knows who's here. Start with Dean.
Dean Veneman, Alderman, District 2.
Justin Pluis, District 3.
Jeff Benscover, Alderman, District 4.
Jay Catno, Alderman, District 5.
Sue Schill, City Attorney.
Dennis Pollock, District 6.
Michael Tim, District 7 Alderman.
Madeline Palmquist, District 8.
Matt Zackermeyer.
Thank you, everyone. Item 2, discuss a referral from myself to change the city attorney position from an elected position to an appointed position. I'll take this up right away and just kind of explain where this came from and my thinking behind it, and then we'll go into discussion. So I put this in last year. There was some due diligence to be had, but the reason for it was a few different areas. It initially started with essentially proactive succession planning as our city attorney. That's completely her own decision, but if we were to be in the event of a retirement, where would we be with that being an elected position? We would obviously have to run a special election, and in the case that no one took out papers for that, we would have to wait a month and then potentially appoint someone. So those are 4-year terms. I also looked at neighboring municipalities and what they did, and there's a lot of appointed city attorney positions. So it became something that I believed we should consider or at least discuss. And then you get into the benefits, which I've weighed, which is appointed versus elected. And do you get, more stability out of an appointed person? Essentially a city staff member that you would bring on, and that person is there, and you don't have to go through, changes in such an important position through elections or other means. There is also the other side of it, that in an elected position, the residents and constituents do get to choose who represents them in that position. So there's benefits to both sides. The election for this position is going to take place next spring, which at this point I've started to lean more towards see what happens with the election. And at that point, potentially take action on this if we do not tonight and going forward. So again, that's the background information on where the referral came from, the thoughts I've had on it, and at this point we'll open it up to discussion.
Thank you for the background. I missed the conversation or the discussion of this, so my initial question was, what problem are we solving by having an appointed versus an elected position? And I understand proactively succession planning. However, we also have the availability to hire an assistant for that position, which we could train in and then work towards if our current attorney decides to retire. Stability kind of threw me off because you have the same variable whether you hire somebody or whether you elect somebody if they choose to resign at any point in time. And we've had a pretty stable attorney, thankfully, for, 30 years? No? I don't know.
20. Ken Hill was 34 years. I am 23 years.
Okay, 23 years. That is a fantastic career and service to the city. I was close. I also don't know how proactive we want to be. If we're planning for something that we don't even know if it's going to be a problem. Again, I see having a recruitment tool. If we have an appointed or hired position, that person would be a city employee. We would then be required to work them into our wage scale. That then would increase the amount of salaries we work into our budget each year, which impacts all of the other things we try to budget for. It also reclassifies some of our retirement and vacation benefits. So we'd have to include that. We'd be spending more on salary and benefits. And I'd get it if we had a hard time recruiting for the position, but we don't know if we have a hard time recruiting because we've had 20 plus years of an attorney. So I'm on the fence about doing it, leaning more towards the benefit for the taxpayer being low and running it to see what happens with the election. And if we just say hypothetically, our attorney decides not to run and retire this year, nobody runs, then we work out what we do from there.
I was kind of on the fence as well, weighing out the pros and cons, and definitely there's a pro of an appointed attorney. You can prepare succession planning and provide better continuity. However, it was just mentioned that over the last 57 years, we've only had 2 different city attorneys, so there's quite a bit of continuity there. And then my other hesitation was by not making it any elected official or elected position, you do take away that power of the citizen to elect who legally represents the city. So I definitely see the pros and cons. I haven't heard much back. I haven't heard any comments from my constituents, but I'd be interested to see what they would think about this.
I got a question on the history of this, I guess. Has anybody ever ran against you at all, Sue, or?
The first, when Ken Hill retired in 2002, there was another person running for that open seat, Attorney John Simons, and myself, and I beat him. But since then, I have not had opposition.
Well, I want to congratulate you on your 23 years of service, because
Thanks.
that's a huge statement,
Well, I don't know if it's.
Well,
I don't know if
no,
that's good
I mean,
or bad, really.
that's
No.
service to the community, and that
Thank you.
deserves a huge thanks in my book.
I did a little research and I found only 17 municipalities, I believe, actually elected their attorney in Wisconsin. So I guess it's a little bit rare when you look at how many municipalities there are. Nothing against Sue and her experience, but you could technically get somebody who has 0 experience in any of this, run for it and win that position, and now we're stuck with 0 experience. Not saying that would happen, but it could happen. Whereas an appointed position, you're not set to somebody who's living in Wisconsin Rapids. They could be experienced from Wausau, Marshfield, Stevens Point, with a lot of experience that could be appointed to that position. So I think it's definitely beneficial to look at the appointed one versus an election, and I think a lot of people don't want to run an election. I'm sure Sue's not looking forward to doing that, especially if there's a contestant against her. But there's a lot of people that will just forget about it because you have to run that election versus apply to a position that might be interesting to them in the appointed one. So I would definitely be for the appointed position.
I believe there are, even though it's an elected position, you still have to be an attorney to be a municipal attorney. Board certified.
Yes.
At least we'd have a board certified attorney and not me trying to run for the elected attorney position. But it sounded like, I haven't gone back and looked at the years, but more that there was people interested in the position when there was the announcement that either the current attorney were retiring, and then we had others who decided that was a good position. And it feels a lot like our role on the council, where if generally speaking you can consider yourself doing an okay job if nobody runs against you. 23 years we've had somebody doing a good job, nobody ran against them. I don't know if it means at the time, when the time comes, that if retirement is announced, then additional people would then take an eye into the position. I also know that we've had conversations about removing municipality requirement from some positions, and that's a little bit contested too amongst the council. So I'm still would be comfortable with the position as is until this current election.
So, on the appointed position, would there be, until somebody else appointed a new one, or once one was appointed, is that just a long, right now it's a 4-year term, correct? So if we appointed a city attorney, is there a time limit on the time that, how does that work then? Is it, does the new mayor, in these cities that have appointed positions, how does that work? Are they appointed and stay appointed, or does a new administration appoint a new one? How's it, you know what I mean? I guess my question, I don't know how it works.
It would be just like any other department head position that
Okay.
you, right?
So, yeah.
And, right. So generally, you know, the position, the person stays in the position, but it's always the mayor or the council. And it really depends if they're an officer or not. But it would just be treated like another department head position.
Exactly, so
Mhm.
it's a department head, if you will. Okay, that makes sense then. If that's the case, in all honesty, I'd probably be in favor of the appointed position myself.
So as we have these discussions, make everyone aware that this is a charter ordinance, so it would take 6 out of 8 council members to change what is currently in place. Would anyone else like to add anything?
I'm a little bit old-fashioned, I guess. I kind of like the idea of people having to compete for a job. You know, an election's been in place for quite a while. We all had to run for an election. It's good to see hungry people keep on their toes. You know, I mean, that's kind of an old-school rule, you know, and young people kind of challenge the older people. And I guess I would like to see that. That would be my initial thoughts. I'm still on the fence, but I also see that point of it.
So, again, Sue's done a great job for 23 years, so this doesn't have anything to do with that. I guess coming from business, I've seen where I've kind of got to the point where I see lawyers for making sure that after the dust settles and the negotiations are over, the lawyers make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed and everything's legal, so that when you finalize it, it's set for, you know, whatever duration of the contract it is and whatnot. I'm just saying, like, things that I've noticed is that when you have a full-time attorney and they're there, it's going to be hard. I might make some people angry, but it becomes a little bit more where people become kind of complacent and they say, well, they start passing more and more stuff onto the attorney because she's there and she's smart and she, you know, especially Sue's really good at wordsmithing and writing out documents. So I'm encouraging everybody to kind of back off that and do your own jobs and get better at it, or take a class or whatever you need to do to get better at writing and get better at thinking through things, so that you're not just relying on somebody else to do the work. So I think, you know, if you set yourself up, you elect somebody, they're in there, they kind of start taking on more and more roles than just what you need them to do. And again, if that is the case, that's fine. We work with it. If they're hired, though, or appointed hired, you can more easily define what their role is, what they do, what you want them to do, get other people to back off and say that's not their job, and focus that time. And you could even, you still have the option too of saying, well, we don't necessarily need to hire them full time if we have a means of retaining somebody, and however we set up the system that we're a client and they take us on and we bring our material to them and they answer questions or whatever and bill out that time. There could be ways of doing it without bringing someone on full time, and the accessories that go with that. So I'm kind of in favor of giving it a shot, especially because majority of municipalities and they deal without having a full-time attorney. Whatever we decide, we're going to be fine and move forward. But since it's brought to the table, those are my thoughts, and we would do well either way. But I would support hiring somebody to do the job. Thank you.
So roles and responsibilities. Currently, we elect our mayor. Our mayor, by our municipal code, is the chief executive officer for the city, which means you have the authority to oversee and manage operations, including telling people that is not somebody's job to do that work, that it needs to be theirs. And if anyone within the city is defying those directives, it's not going to be solved by hiring one position. It is an issue that is deeper. It'd be like sending street crews to respond to a fire or a police emergency. It'd be taking on more cost without actually fixing a problem. I don't think that is something. I find it encouraging that we are asking people to do drafts and then send. I personally like doing that, and I appreciate when I can draft a document or an ordinance and then send it off to our attorney. I think it takes the workload off of drafting an ordinance from scratch, and then allows the attorney to use their skills as an attorney to cross the T's and dot the I's before we move something into effect. But I don't see hiring the position being a solution to our performance and operation structure.
Just letting you know, like, we are working on it, has been talked about, and we continue to move forward on it. And either way we move forward, it'll be something that we'll have to work on.
I completely trust that you do that every day.
Thank you.
All right, so take more questions, comments, if anybody has anything, but, go
I was
ahead.
just going to ask Sue's thoughts.
Well, I'm not going to take a position on this. There's actually an ethics statute that I want to steer clear of in terms of violating, but I think it's when we're talking about an appointment or, I'm currently an elected official, I'm currently an employee, and it would be inappropriate for me to talk at all about taking a job after my, if my term is done, if you would do something, make it appointed. And I think you have to concentrate on what's best for the city, and not think about me in the position or how long I'm going to work or whatever. I think, is it best to have this position to be appointed or elected? And if you want further counsel on what an appointment might look like, then I would probably direct you to outside counsel, because I'm not even comfortable really discussing how that might work and when that might happen, because I don't think it would be appropriate for me to comment. So, sorry, I'm not really taking a position on it. I think it's more I think it's not about me. I think it's just about the, you know, the future of the city and what you want to do. And it's a philosophical question, and it's, you know, I think you'll do right no matter what you do. I mean, however you feel, the majority of you, and so, I guess that's all I'm willing to really talk about. I've even talked to the League of Wisconsin Municipalities kind of about this, so that's why I don't want to cross the line of, you know, talking about the what ifs or my specific position or future and so forth. Right now, I have a elected term that has another year in it. I'm looking forward to that, and I think you need to, you know, make that decision kind of outside of me. But if you want further counsel on how an appointment might work and so on, I know Dean had the question. I think that was a fairly simple question for me to answer, but anything more than that on the process and when and how and that I would probably have you engage in other counsel too, because I'm kind of in an awkward position with that, and I hope you all understand.
I can appreciate a lot of the pros and cons that have been mentioned, and as I'm sitting here thinking about it, there's just something that, and it was mentioned that we could but if you had an appointed attorney, you could potentially get somebody that lived outside the city limits. And I guess that didn't really sit too well with me. I feel like the city attorney gives a lot of counsel, a lot of advice to the common council, to the operations of the city. And I feel like if it was somebody who didn't live in the city, you know, maybe they wouldn't always be in the best interest of the Wisconsin Rapids citizen. So I just wanted to mention that as we were sitting here thinking, or debating, that thought came across my mind.
All right, thank you, everyone. I appreciate the discussion. If there's anything more, we can certainly discuss it after this, but I'll just mention that the nomination papers for this position, being that we're 6 months away from when those would be taken out, and this does not seem, what's that? Sorry for the reminder. Oh, is it? Okay. So we're close to when those who would be interested in this position would need to circle nomination papers, and at this time, it doesn't have support to pass a new charter ordinance based on the comments made here tonight, so no action needs to be taken. And this is a good discussion to have in case we do end up in a situation where things change in the future. So if anybody else has anything to add, feel free. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next item. Okay, item 3, adjournment.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion by Palmquist, second by Plus. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 3-0. Meeting adjourned at 6:24 p.m.